And it sounds so silly, but I heard once like this saying, like, if I gave you like $10 million like today, but there was one hook, would you take the money? Right. You take $10 million, of course, right? But the hook is, this is your last day on Earth. Like, tomorrow you die. You wouldn't take the $10 million. Like, I don't think people realize like the value of time is so immense that you have to remember like that value is so much more than just like hustle.
I think that is a good combination for most people who come out of Stanford or any other school and they're super successful. It's drive and flexibility. And then you know this from startups, you're not going to always succeed right away. So if you don't know how to pivot, you don't know how to be flexible. If you are not curious enough to read what's coming or possibly coming or thinking along new lines, bringing in new perspectives, new people, being very diverse in how you approach a problem, you're probably not going to do well if you give it right away. It requires that drive and flexibility. So that's what I think is the main quality of a lot of the people I went to school with.
Sam Altman was learning from all the founders. Like, he was learning what works and what doesn't. You know, being the CEO of Y Combinator, you see thousands upon thousands of companies. You get a barometer for what makes a successful company. So he had his own personal experiment camp where he saw thousands of companies coming in and he would fund them. They would either be successful, they'd fail gloriously, whatever. It's just the way that it is. And he would see like what made them work. I think subconsciously it like intertwined into his brain over the years, like how to build a successful company. And I'm like, I see him iterating at such a hyper scale now and moving at such a pace that, you know, he is showing a really good bright side to like what startups are.
And so I think the next big wave in blockchain cryptocurrency is going to be automated ledger-based transactions between AI. And then what's going to happen there is like you go from 0 transactions or like thousands of transactions on a particular network to millions a day. You know what I mean? And that cryptocurrency's value is going to just dramatically increase. So I think there's some interest. There's a layering of the last like 3 big tech waves that are going to next and be fueled into AI.
What I've noticed that YC liked in the past was business to business startups, like SaaS based startups. They love those for a long period of time. They did explore like physical spaces like Airbnb and renting and those types of marketplaces. They started to explore like really speculative projects, like how to solve cancer or how to cure AIDS.
Combining deterministic algorithms with probabilistic engines, when you do that, you've got an agent. And these large language models are they're very computationally intensive, they're expensive, and they can answer any question about anything. The most use these LLMs like ChatGPT they've had is really making search efficient and doing some basic functions like summarization, outlining things, and which is really, these are useful functions, but they haven't been able to touch software. Because business runs software, and software need re-engineered to run on AI as a platform, okay? Because if AI is a platform, then the software needs to be re-engineered to run on AI as a platform. Now, the question is, what does that architecture look like?
I guess another question is like, what have you done in the past that was amazing? They're going to ask that question like on their application. And you need like a good answer for that. It doesn't have to be perfect, but on a Y Combinator application, I think like story around product and launching something with revenue is really, really compelling.
Yeah, I mean, I think avoid co-founder disputes. Like, try and have a good co-founder and a good relationship with your co-founder. A co-founder relationship is like a marriage, and a good marriage looks like one with a lot of communication in it, and that's the same thing with a co-founder relationship. My co-founder Nick and I are super direct with one another. We tell each other all the things that we're unhappy about, and we talk about it, and nothing is off the table. I think it's unbelievably important to be able to do that as a startup founder, because the number one cause of startup or infant startup mortality is co-founder disputes. People breaking up, big fights, company ends up getting embroiled in all kinds of legal disputes, all kinds of stuff. That kills tons of early stage startups.
For you, did you raise a lot of small checks, or you don't have to answer this, or one big check, or like, I guess a lot of founders are confused by that because they think, oh, I just started a company, I need to get $2 million and I need to get one check. Like that's in my head,
No,
that's wrong thinking, but
in
maybe
our
you can
case,
talk through
no,
it.
in our case, we don't like when YC told us like it doesn't really matter because like it's safe. It's really easy to assign, you know. I mean, like if you're not concerned with the investor, I mean, like it's like a good investor, you will not have any problem with them. Like you can sign any amount you want, right? Even if you have like huge network of like kind of like fund, like investors, friends who can actually invest 5-10K, that's a good start. You can bootstrap your like initial round because it's much easier to close the second check than the first one. So in our case, we had, I don't remember like numbers, but we do have many small checks like 50K, 20K, but and also we have like larger, much larger checks like 500K, 200K, and so on.
When you're building a startup, it's very, very emotional because people in the early days don't believe in you, right? So like, but when you have like a friend who's like really hyper believed in you, it got us to that point with my first company, which was a huge like success. And I was like, how did we get here? And it was, I think, him believing in me. He saw something in me. He would just trust my gut a lot of the time. You know, he kind of just gave me a lot of power and belief of myself. And I'm like, that was a valuable relationship where I saw something in him, he saw something in me, and we just kind of took it all the way.
I'm working with a company right now where we're just going to be doing manual work. And we're actually lucky in today's day and age to like this Mechanical Turk, there's Fiverr, there's all of these things that allow us to do manual work at a lower cost. And so if you can scale with those types of strategies, understand them, you can turn manual things into software a lot better, and you can validate that those features are necessary for your either internal team or your customer, and build with more confidence and conviction that way. So I am a huge believer in do things that don't scale for sure. It maximizes learning and reduces burn.
YC was game changing for me because I was an outsider in Canada. Like, but if I would lived in the Bay Area and I grew up with that, you probably don't need to do it, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, I love YC, but like, YC is really good for people that are outside of the ecosystem coming in. Like, if you're in India or if you're in Canada or you're in Europe and you're coming in, I think those people I find get the most benefit. And dude, look at a lot of the most successful companies are all expats. Like, if you think about it. Most of them are expats because they're like these outsiders that had this unique insight and they came in to the US in a different market as opposed to like, and that's not true across the board. And I have no data to back that up and I'm biased, but I'm just saying maybe that's true.
But this is part of the fun of like doing a startup. Like for me, this is part of like where I get excited. It's like when you have these constraints on a company and how do you blow past those? Because I think the average company in the United States is less than $1 million in revenue a year. How do you get past 1 million? How do you get past 10 million? How do you get past 40 million? That's where the excitement, like it's the excitement of those barriers. It's, you know, how do you do that in a startup? It's part of the fun of like, for me, like where I get happiness. But we're in those challenges now, like the thick of it. It's like, there's a lot of constraints on our company and it's like, how do we unlock to get to the next level and the next level and the next level? You know, for me, that's the fun of it. It's versus build everything yourself. So you saw, I guess unintentionally, you partnered up with Shopify without, you know, I mean, maybe that was really intentional, but it sounds like that was like a rocket ship that took and helped the company.
It has pros and cons. You know, if you imagine you're clinging to the outside of a rocket ship, you can go really far. You might even get into space, but you're not controlling the rocket ship. You're not deciding where it's going. And you might end up getting burned by the boosters on the rocket ship. I think that's kind of what happened to us eventually, but it took a really long time. You know, and we sort of saw it coming as well. But, you know, we had years and years of unabated exponential up and to the right growth by just being in Shopify. And we were certainly lucky to be one of the first in the Shopify space. And, you know, Shopify is absolutely massive. At the time, it wasn't massive. I think they'd only just IPO'd when we launched on, October 2015, we launched on Shopify. And in fact, we launched on Shopify and it seemed like it wasn't going anywhere and we all quit and went and got jobs. And that's when I worked for Y Combinator as a software engineer. But by the time I started at YC as a software engineer, day one of YC, Shogun was making $1,000 a month. And then a few months later, it was making $5,000 a month. And a few months after that, it was making $10,000 a month. And then a few months after that, it was making $20,000 a month. And that's when I looked at it and said, oh shit, this thing is actually growing really, really fast. Like, what's going on here?
someone who's trying to decide like getting out of the job and starting a company, or else why not about just getting out of the college and trying to have a startup?
I think that someone who actually really wants, they will definitely will get into it, like maybe now, maybe later, but they will just naturally lean to this. My picture is the following. If everything doesn't work, I failed to build a company, I failed to build another one. Like, what is the worst case scenario?
You should make it really clear and apparent in your application that I have a full-time job, it pays the bills, but my true passion is building my own company. Would you be willing to move to San Francisco during the batch? You should also state that I am staying in San Francisco because I want to do a startup and I moved here because of that. That was something my co-founder had said. I moved to San Francisco from India. This is what my co-founder. It's very true and it's very compelling. He said, I moved from India to San Francisco because I want to build a startup. It made them feel really good about it. You need to create a compelling story that says, I'm going to do this regardless. I moved here. I have a full-time job, but the goal is to build my own company.
I think to the credit of everyone that I've ever worked with at YC, they sense authenticity and they sense low ego and they sense ambition and they sense aligned incentives. And they also sense the monsters. Like Jessica asked me in my interview, are you a monster? And I was like, I haven't read that essay. I don't even know what that means. But the answer is yes. If I have a sense that something needs to be done in a particular way, there's nothing that will stop me from achieving it. And so I think whoever I am, whatever my experiences are and however I presented myself seemed like a good fit for how YC operates and the people that they tend to have around them.
Don't build the software. Don't be impulsive. Build it. Sometimes it's just doing the work without actually having your engineering resources cycle through that, where they could do something in a day versus the engineers working a week or 2 weeks on it.
Exactly. And if you are doing the calculations, it's it's going to take me 30 hours a week to do this fucking, this task. Okay, do it yourself for 10 of those hours. That's enough for you to learn how easy it is, or make a little instruction manual on how to do it for someone else. Then they do it for another 10 hours and you find some issues, in that process, and 30 hours. And so you've just spent maybe a week learning the entire workflow, figuring out and architecting a way to fulfill that service without you being involved, and are now set up to learn from that workflow and deliver that service at a larger scale, maybe not at the scale we're dreaming of that software can create.
When you're applying to Y Combinator, just remember that there's going to be thousands upon thousands of other applications. You may get rejected. Don't get deterred. I can tell you how many people get deterred. They don't apply again. I see it over and over again. That one guy who just didn't get deterred, those are the people that just don't get phased by rejection. And I think those are the ones that tend to get in at a higher probability over time, because I did meet a lot of founders that were in YC in batches that had a similar story. I applied, I was ignored, I applied, I was ignored, I applied, I was ignored. The 6th time I got in.